Okay, this is problem 12 on page 688, section 11.4, looking at installment buying. Problem 12 says that Sam Bazzi purchased a 2006 PT Cruiser GT for $25,000. Sam obtained a 60-month, no money down installment loan with an APR of 8%. Two questions. First, determine Sam's total finance charge, and then secondly, determine Sam's monthly payment. So these problems differ from the simple interest problems back in section 11.2 in that we are making regular payments. So this is a 60-month payment plan in order to pay off the $25,000 plus the interest that accrues. And the interest on these types of loans is not simple interest. It's using the APR, which is the true rate of interest, including all kinds of fees, service charges, etc. And so we're going to use a table to calculate interest when it involves APR. So the first thing we're trying to find here is his total finance charge. In other words, how much is he paying for the right to borrow $25,000? Because he's not even paying any money down. So this is a copy of the chart that's in your book. In your book, it's found on page 680. This is what it looks like. It says finance charge per $100 of amount financed. And down the left-hand column, you have number of payments. These are usually in 6-month increments. And across the top, you have APR values ranging from 4 to 10%, skipping by 0.5%. And so since this is finance charges per $100 of amount financed, the first thing we need to know is how many $100 increments does Sam want to finance in this problem. That's not a difficult calculation. If he wants to borrow $25,000, we divide it by 100 and get 250 $100 increments. Now, back to the chart. Each one of those $100 increments is going to cost us a certain amount. How much is based off the table. We know it's a 60-month loan at an APR of 8%. So we find those two numbers on here. 60-month loan, APR of 8%, match up those two numbers and we find 21.66. So this is a dollar amount. Each one of those $100 increments will cost him $21.66. So the finance charge is 250 times 21.66, which is $5,415, and that is a dollar amount. And that's the answer to part A. Part B asks determine Sam's monthly payment. Well, Sam is going to have to repay the entire $25,000 as well as this finance charge of $5,415. This is the money he's paying in order to rent the $25,000 basically. So he's got 60 months over which to repay this. So his monthly payment is calculated by dividing the $25,000 plus the finance charge of $5,415 over 60 months. If you're putting this in your calculator all at once, make sure you put the numerator in parentheses. So you type that in your calculator and we get 506.92. So he would have a monthly payment of $506.92. Okay, problem 14, found on page 688, is kind of the reverse of problem 12. This time we're told information about the payment and want to go backwards and eventually calculate the APR. The problem reads, Ilga Ross purchased a new laptop computer on a monthly purchase plan. The computer sold for $14.95 Ilga paid 5% down and $64 a month for 24 months. What finance charge did she pay, and what is the APR to the nearest half percent? So I've written down the pertinent information here. Cost was $1,495. She's going to make a down payment of 5%. Well, we can go ahead and calculate that value. 5% of what? Well, 5% of the $1,495. So we type that in our calculator, and we get $74.75. So the amount that she actually financed was not $1,495. It was the difference between $1,495 and the down payment of $74.75, which is $1,420.25. So that's how much she actually borrowed. And she is making payments of $64 a month for 24 months. So if we want to calculate the finance charge, we can't quite do this the same way as problem 12 because we don't know the APR. But if you think about the finance charge, it's also the difference between the cash price and the installment price, or the borrowing price, so to speak. So if she'd had additional cash, she could have paid $1,420.25. And that would have been all she paid. But she didn't, so she had to borrow this amount. And instead, she's paying $64 a month for 24 months. So we could see the total payments would add up to 24 times 64, which is $1,536. But she only financed $1,420.25. So the finance charge is the difference between those. $1,536 minus $1,420.25, which is $115.75. And that's the answer to part A. Part B asks us to calculate the APR to the nearest half percent. Well, if you recall back to problem 12, the way we calculated APR there was figure out the number of $100 increments and then multiply that number by the proper number off the chart. Well, we can still find the number of $100 increments because we know the amount she financed. So $100 increments are 1420.25 divided by 100, which is 14.2025, and you want to keep all the decimal places. And then what we did was we multiplied 14.2025 times a particular value, and we ended up with the finance charge. Well, we also know the finance charge here. It's $115.75. So what we want to know in order to find the APR is, what is this number? How much does each of those $100 increments cost us? So if we divide both sides by 14.2025 and round to two places, we get that X equals 8.15. So what we just calculated here, this is the cost per $100 increment. And now we can use our table. So I'm looking for $8.15 somewhere in this table. What do I know? Well, I know the time. So the $8.15 has to be on the 24-month row. So I'm going across here trying to find 8.15, and I find $8 and I find 8.54. Often you will not get the exact value, so we pick the one that's closest to it. $8 is closest to 8.15. So I go up and find out that that's a 7.5% APR. Notice the question asked for the APR to the nearest 0.5%. So 7.5% is the nearest value for $8.15. There you have it. Okay, sometimes when you take out an installment loan, you would like to perhaps pay it off early. Well, if you pay it off early, you're not going to owe as much interest as you would if you continue to faithfully make all the payments till the very end. So in problem 18, we find that Jeslianne Hernandez has a 48-month installment loan with a fixed monthly payment of $83.81 a month. The amount she borrowed was $3,500, but instead of making her 18th payment, she's going to pay the remaining balance on the loan. And the first question is to determine the APR of the installment loan. Now, we did an example of this in the last problem, but it doesn't hurt to see another one. So if we want the finance charge first in order to find the APR. So the finance charge is going to be the difference between her installment price of $83.81 a month for 48 months and how much she actually borrowed. So the total of her payments is 48 times 83.81, which ends up being $4,022.88. So the finance charge is the difference between this amount and how much she actually borrowed. Because if she had had the cash, she could have just paid the $3,500, but she didn't, and so she's paying a finance charge of $522.88. So to find the APR, we need to know $100 increments. How many of those did she finance? 3,500 divided by 100 equals 35. And now 35 times some value off the chart has to give us the finance charge of $522.88. So if I want to know what that number is off the chart, divide $522.88 by 35, and I get 14.94. So going to the chart, I know it was originally a 48-month loan, and I'm looking for 14.94. Well, I find that number exactly in the 7% APR column. So 7% APR is the answer to part A. Part B, how much interest will she save by paying off the loan early? Well, if you pay off a loan early, we need what's called the formula for the actuarial method for unearned interest. U equals NPV over 100 plus V. And that formula can be found in your text on page 682. Now, what do the letters in the formula mean? Well, N stands for the number of remaining payments excluding the current payment. So if it's a 48-month loan, she's paying it off at the 18th. So not counting the 18th, there would be 48 minus 18, 30 future payments. So that's the N value. P is the payment, 83.81. And V is the value from the APR table that corresponds to both the APR and the number of remaining payments. So instead of the 48, we're going to use the 30. So go back to the chart, find 30. I know it's a 7% APR loan. 9.30 is where those values cross. So 9.30. All of that divided by 100 plus 9.30. Notice the V shows up in both the numerator and the denominator. So we plug that into the calculator. If you're going to do it all at once, make sure you put the denominator completely in parentheses. We end up with $213.93, and that's how much interest Jeslianne would save by paying this loan off early. So lastly, part C says, what is the total amount due to pay off the loan? Okay, Okay, so she actually wants to pay off the loan. She's going to write a check to the bank or the store. How much does it need to be? Well, we know that she has 30 payments left. So the value of those 30 payments is 30 times 83.81, which is 25, 14, 30. We know that she hasn't made her 18th payment, but it is still due. So current payment also needs to be in there. That's 83.81. So if I add those two together, I get 25.98.11. But we will save in interest costs. My interest saved is the $213.93, so I get to subtract that value out, and I come to a grand total of $23.84.18. So that is the value that the bank would require to pay off the loan, $2,384.18.